Hi, this is Jamie Magarich. Welcome to Jamie's Craft Table. Today I'm going to show you how I made this card. And I'm going to show you a casual version and an avid version as well. This is a simple stamping card, so let's get started. What you're going to need for the first one is a card base. This is Seaside Spray. It's 8.5 by 5.5, scored and folded at 4 1/4. A piece of Whisper White, which is 4 by 5 1/4. We're going to be using Positive Thoughts, this feather, and Free as a Bird, this bird here, and the sentiment, the world needs more of you. For this card, for the Avid card, we're going to be using some dies, the stitched squares, the 2 largest ones, and the stitched rectangles, these two here, the 2 smallest ones. Okay, for inks, we have Blueberry Bushel, Balmy Blue, Sahara Sand, Night of Navy, and Memento Tuxedo Black. We have a water brush or paintbrush, and some water, the Tombow glue, and some dimensionals. Okay, so let's get started. Alright, on this one we're going to bring in the feather. We're going to start with the Sahara Sand. Okay, I want it open, there we go. Okay, so, oh, hold on. Okay, I'm going to take the feather and the crumb cake, or Sahara Sand, excuse me, and we're going to stamp, and then we're going to turn the stamp and stamp again. We're going to cover this whole paper. Oh, I almost forgot. With this one, first thing we need to do is stamp our bird. So let's do that first. With the black ink on this one, I'm going to stamp our bird down here. Okay, and then we'll stamp the sentiment just below it with the same black ink. Okay, we're done with that Memento ink then. Alright, now we're going to stamp the feathers. We want to vary the placement of the feathers, the direction they are. Vary the stamped off and the non-stamped off ones. However, if you're going to go off the page, I want to show you on here, you don't want to stamp it again, because see how part of it's darker? It will show up. A couple more here. Dark one up here. Stamp part of that on there. Let's do dark here. Stamped off one there. I think that's probably good. Okay, now we're going to bring in our chamois and we're going to clean it off. And we're going to switch ink colors. We're going to go to the Balmy Blue. We're going to do the same thing. It's alright to overlap the feathers. So dark, stamp off, dark, stamp off. Try to vary the direction, like I said, they look better. The direction is different. You don't want to stamp over your bird though. Okay, now I'm just going to stamp this off. I'm going to come in with a blueberry bushel, and we're going to do the same thing. Okay, that's all of our stamping. Actually, I think I'm going to put one up here. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to mount this to the front of our card base. And that is our simple stamping card. There's the one we just made. There's the one I made previous. Each one's going to be a little bit different. Just kind of looks like the bird's standing in the leaves. Okay. Now we're going to go to the next version, which would be the casual stamper. I've added a couple layers, and I've added a bow and a couple rhinestones. Okay, so bring out the pieces. There's my bow. There's the rhinestones. I'm using the holiday rhinestones. Okay, I have a card base. This time I'm using the thick white. I have a layer of Seaside Spray, which is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. I have a layer of white, which is 4 by 5 1/4. I have a layer of Seaside Spray, which is 2 1/8 by 2 3/4. I have a layer of white, which is 1 7/8 by 2 1/2. I have a layer of Seaside Spray, which is 7/8 by 2 3/4. And a layer of white, which is 3/4 by 2 1/2. Okay, so we're going to put most of these pieces aside so we know where they are and they're not in the way. I'm going to start with these ones. The first thing I'm going to do is stamp my bird. This time, I need to wash my stamp. This time I'm going to be using Night of Navy for the bird and the sentiment. Okay, so I'm going to stamp my bird on this center of this 1 7/8 by 2 1/2 inch piece. While I have the ink out, I'm going to go ahead and bring in my sentiment. I'm going to stamp that on this piece here. Perfect. Okay. Close this up for a minute. Okay, now I'm going to bring in a paintbrush. This is a water brush. And then I'm just gonna, I'll show you. This is an old pink glass. I just dipped it in, made sure there's no water dripping off of it. And I'm gonna use this and the ink that's on my paper to paint this in. If you have too much water, go ahead and wipe it off on a paper towel. I just bleed it in just a little bit from the paint that's existing on here. You see? Okay, set that aside, let it dry. I'm going to bring in this and we're going to do the same exact thing that we did on the previous one. I think I need to clean my chamois. I'll start with the Sahara sand. Stamp again, cover this whole background. Oops, see how that was half stamped off? I'm not going to worry about it, but that's what I was talking about before. That time I stamped off onto here because I just wanted the stamped off version. Okay, wash this off into the balmy blue. Do the same as before. Okay, wash it off, go into the blueberry bushel. Oops, well, gotta push too hard there. Got a halo. Let's see if I can hide it. Alright, now we can put this card together. Close these so I don't have a disaster. Just have to open them up again in a minute, but that's alright. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is mount this Seaside Spray piece to my card base. just going to be like a 1/16 of an inch border around the edge. Mount this layer on top of there. Okay, now we're going to layer these pieces up. Okay, I'm going to bring in some dimensionals. I probably use more dimensionals than you need. I just don't like things sagging. Peel all these backs off. The bird's going to go down here. I think on the original I didn't pop them up, but that's alright. We will pop them up anyway. And this one down here. Oh, I forgot to flag my ends. Alright. So just snip in. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it because it's... Normally I would line those two edges up, but I forgot to do it previous to cutting it, but we'll make it work. Just going from the corners to the slit that I cut in the center. And it would look much nicer if I'd done it previous to gluing those together. Fiddle. It's going to go down here. Okay, we're going to bring in some of these rhinestones. I'm going to put one of the large ones up here. One of the small ones with it. And I'm going to put one down here. There we go, and then I have the little bow. I'm bringing a glue dot for. You need to roll that glue dot up. We're going to add that bow down here. Okay, there's the card we just made together. Here's the one I did previous. Again, those tails would look nicer if you did it before you glued them together. You line up the straight edges. I'll show you on a scrap paper. Let's put a couple pieces here. They don't have to match. Okay. So you line up the edges like that so that they're touching. Then you're going to cut up the center. Then you're going to go from corner to corner. Corner to corner. Corner to corner. Corner to center. Then when you layer them on top of each other, you have a perfect match. Okay. So there's two. Okay, now the third one has gold embossing on it and gold foil paper. Some gold sequins that are left over from a paper pumpkin. Okay, so my pieces. I have a card base. Again, the thick 5.5 by 8.5, scored and folded at 4 1/4. I have a piece of gold foil, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/4. Out of the center of that, I have cut the largest gold square and the second to the smallest of the long narrow of the rectangles. Okay, then I have taken the next size down and cut a piece of white, and then I'd set that die on top of a piece of the balmy blue and cut around the outside edge of it so that I would have a bordered piece. Okay, I did the same thing for the smallest of those rectangles. And then I have a piece of balmy blue, or excuse me, it is Seaside Spray, not balmy blue. Seaside Spray, and that is 4 by 5 1/4, and a piece of white, which is 3 3/4 by 5. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is place all these pieces aside. I just need the white ones. Let's do the bird first, so it has a little bit of time to dry. We're going to do it just like we did in the other one. We're going to bring in the Night of Navy. I'm going to stamp that bird in the center of this square. It's going to overlap the rectangle, the stitch edge just a tiny little bit. Bring in the sentiment while we're at it. Now the sentiment is going to overhang on the bottom. The wording's going to, the loops of the F and the U are going to not be on it. But I wanted this stitching, so that's why I chose to do it that way. But you could just do it freehand and then cut it out if you wish. Okay. Bring in that water brush. Dip it in the water. Let's paint this bird real fast. Basically all I'm doing is activating the ink that we just stamped onto here. Okay, there you go. Place those aside, let them dry. We're going to bring in this piece. We're going to start by washing this off. Because I'm going to be stamping in Versamark. And I'm just gonna stamp some feathers all over this. It's hard to see because it's clear. So if you need to stamp a few and then put the embossing powder on and then stamp a few more, I can just see a little bit of a shimmer on the paper. I don't know if you can see it. Just a couple more here. Let's go ahead and put the powder on and see where we stand. We probably should have dusted this with the embossing buddy, the powder bag, so that we didn't get embossing powder where we didn't want it. Now I've just layered a couple coffee filters. I'm just dumping my powder on. Make sure it's covered wherever I have stamping. Okay, and I'm going to add a couple where I need them. So ink it up. I want one coming in here, just a part of one. One coming in here. There's not anything on this bottom at all, so. Okay, let's put the powder on those. Okay, that looks pretty good. Put this away so I don't spill it all over the place. And the nice part about these coffee filters, I stagger two of them. I don't know if you can see. Let's move this so you can see. So you just pick it up and then you can dump it right back into your little jar. Anything that gets left goes into the second one. Like if you spill it. There you go. Alright, let's bring in the heat tool. Bring it up here so you can see. I've got it on the second setting. It works better if you can warm it up a little bit first. And you see it turning gold there? The powder is melting. Once it melts, move on to another area so you don't burn it. It's pretty cool. So it changes from this kind of grayish brown color to this really pretty gold. The heat gun is hot, so don't aim it at yourself. So a little bit here I want to wipe off. Oh, it's too late. Okay. Awesome. Make sure there isn't any powder still left on it. There you go. Okay, now I'm going to wash this off, although it wouldn't matter. And we're going to come in with the Sahara sand. This time, instead of stamping full strength in the Sahara sand, this will be our first generation. We're going to just use second generation. So I'm going to ink up my feather, stamp off, and stamp onto the paper. Stamp off, stamp onto the paper. I'm going to do that all around. Stamp off. Okay, wash the stamp off. Come in with the balmy blue. This time we're just going to do first generation. We're not going to worry about second generation. So we're going to stamp, stamp. It's alright if it overlaps, even if it overlaps the embossing, because it'll wipe right off of there. One more over here. One up here. Okay. Now we're going to come in with a blueberry bushel. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to stamp with the blueberry bushel. Just need one up here. Okay. Stamp off. Alright, now I'm going to bring in a microfiber cloth. You can use a paper towel. And I'm just going to gently wipe on top of these feathers that we embossed, so any residual ink that's sitting on top of them will get wiped off, because it would not dry on there. It would just end up smudging on some, and this way you can see the images better. Alright, now we can assemble our card. Let's bring in all the pieces. First thing I'm going to do is attach this to the balmy blue piece. Hold it down a minute because it has a little bit of warpage from embossing. So it wants to curl up a little bit. Come in with this. I'm going to put glue on this and mount it to the card base. Now, this is not Stampin' Up! Foil paper. This is some I had in my stash that I need to use before I can buy more Stampin' Up! I need to use my stash. Okay, that's a little bit long, so I'm going to bring in my mini trimmer that you can get if you join Stampin' Up! Right now. Comes free with your kit. Put it's perfect for stuff like that. All my layering and stuff. Alright, and this piece is going to get mounted on the front of that. Okay, I'm going to bring in all of our layers. Now our sentiment, I'm going to glue directly onto this little layer here. Whoops, come on. Alright, I need some dimensionals for the back of my bird. Come on. Here, there. Okay, that's going to get mounted onto our balmy blue square. Add some more dimensionals. Add a couple to the back of this one while we're at it. Alright, I'm at the end of my... I got just a strip left, so... I'll look. Take those backs off. This is going to get mounted onto our gold square. Center it up. And this one will get mounted to the gold rectangle. This is the trickiest part, centering this up on this rectangle. Okay, then these will get glued down with the wet glue or your tape runner. This one gets centered. This top here is equal distance between this top and the two sides. Make sure it's straight. This one will get put down below it. Oops. Okay, we'll bring in the gold sequins. These are left over from a paper pumpkin. And I'm going to put one large one. They have glue dots on the back of them. I'll put one large one up here. And the small ones in. One small one here. Take your pick tool, works good for picking these up, but the glue dots on the back of these don't want to stay put, so one here. And there's our last card. So there's the one we just made together. Here's the one I did previous. There's the Avid. Here's the one for the casual stamper. And here's one for the simple stamper, the beginner. Well, thank you for joining me at Jamie's Craft Table. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope you can find some time to play with some stamps, inks, and paper.